At the will, reading my parents sat with calm expressions, their hands folded neatly on the polished oak table. The room smelled like old money leather chairs cologne and a faint trace of dry flowers. The family lawyer, Mr. Denson, wore the same navy suit he had always worn during our annual estate reviews. He looked exhausted and maybe a little uncomfortable. To my left, my sister Vanessa crossed her legs with the kind of elegance you only learn at expensive boarding schools. Her makeup was subtle but perfect. Her diamond bracelet caught the morning light flickering like a warning sign. "And now," Mr. Denson said, clearing his throat, "per Walter Whitman's estate plan, we proceed with disbursement." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. Slowly, he opened it. "To Vanessa Whitman." He read, "My granddaughter, I leave a financial inheritance of $10 million to be deposited directly into your personal trust account." Vanessa smiled not smugly, but with the kind of satisfaction that comes when life goes exactly as expected. My mother let out a quiet breath, proud. My father nodded as if approving a business deal. Then the lawyer turned to me. "And to Claire Whitman," he began. I sat straighter, heart pounding. This was it, the moment I would finally be recognized, seen. Mr. Denson paused, his eyes flicking toward my parents. Something in his face shifted. "Claire," my father said instead, cutting off the lawyer, "your grandfather always admired your independence. That's why we're giving you the chance to keep earning your own." I blinked. "No financial inheritance," my mother added quickly, her voice like sugar melting on steel. "But you've always made your own way, haven't you?" I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I just stared at the polished wood table. My pulse was thudding in my ears. No one looked at me, not even the lawyer. Then from the back corner of the room, a quiet cough broke the silence. A man I hadn't noticed stood up. He wore a gray wool suit and held a worn leather portfolio in his hands. "I'm sorry," he said. "There's one more document." The room turned toward him in slow motion. "And who are you?" my mother asked, her tone tight. "My name is Harold Keene," he replied, pulling out a yellowed envelope. "Walter Whitman's private legal representative. I've been instructed to read this only in Claire's presence." My mother's smile cracked. My father's jaw tensed. Vanessa's hand twitched. "What is that?" Vanessa asked, eyes narrowing. "A sealed letter from Mr. Whitman," Mr. Keene said, "containing a personal addendum to his estate plan, not filed with the rest." Mr. Denson stepped back surprised. "I was not made aware." "You weren't meant to be," Mr. Keene interrupted calmly. He held up the envelope. "Mr. Whitman requested that this document be read only when Claire was present, and only after the formal proceedings were complete." The air changed. It got tighter, sharper. My mother shifted in her seat. Vanessa's eyes were locked on the envelope like it might explode. "I have also been given full authority," Mr. Keene added, "to take over estate execution if any part of this letter contradicts the public will." There was a pause, a long, chilling pause, and then he opened it. He unfolded the letter slowly like it was sacred. "To Claire," he read. "If you are hearing this, it means they tried to erase you. But I didn't forget. And I never agreed to any of this." My breath caught in my throat. "You were always mine, Claire. My legacy, not just my blood. What comes next will explain everything. Be strong." I turned to my parents. My mother had gone completely pale. And then she screamed. I used to think that love, real love, would always find a way. That no matter how messy life became, if someone truly cared about you, they'd make sure you knew it. But what I've learned, what I had to learn the hard way, is that sometimes people will go to extraordinary lengths to make sure you're forgotten. After college, I had planned to spend the summer with Grandpa at his ranch. It was always the one place where I didn't feel like I had to perform, where I could exist in silence with my books and my questions and my strange, slow way of looking at the world. I called him in May. No answer. I called again. Nothing. Then I got a message from my mother. "Don't bother," she said flatly. "He's busy. He's getting older. He doesn't need your stress right now." Stress. That's what I was to them, a problem, an emotional liability. I should have known then that something was wrong. I drove down in March anyway, just showed up. The ranch looked quiet. Vanessa answered the door. I remember the way she smiled, polite but distant. "No one's here," she said. "They're visiting relatives in Georgia. Didn't Mom tell you I left a note?" I waited in my car for almost an hour. No one came home. I drove back to my apartment feeling like maybe I had overstepped. What I didn't know, what I only found out months later, was that they were home every single day. My grandfather was sick, and I wasn't told. The silence grew louder. I stopped receiving holiday invitations. My calls went to voicemail. One day, even my emails started bouncing back. I texted Vanessa. No reply. I texted my mom. "We're giving you space," she wrote. "You always said you needed that." I didn't. I had never said that. What I needed was connection. What I needed was truth. I got the news of Grandpa's death from a friend who saw the obituary online. No one had called me. No one had told me when he passed. I flew down for the funeral, got to the church at 11 a.m. It was empty, cold. The janitor looked at me with confusion. "That service was at 9, he said. I stood there in the doorway holding flowers I had bought at the airport, my hands shaking, my breath shallow. I had missed it. They had made sure I missed it. Later, I found out the truth from Grandma. The funeral was never at 11. It had always been scheduled for the morning. They had just told me otherwise. They told everyone else that I didn't show, that I didn't care. That was the day something inside me broke, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a quiet, irreversible one. It was like watching someone turn off the last light in a room you used to call home. I didn't know where to put the grief. Not just the grief for my grandfather, but for the family I thought I still had. The realization that my own parents had chosen to delete me, had rewritten the narrative so that I was the distant, ungrateful daughter who abandoned everyone, while Vanessa stayed close, loyal, smiling, convenient, and it worked. For a while it worked. They were the ones who sat at every estate meeting. They were the ones who smiled next to Grandpa in the family holiday photos I was never invited to. They curated the image of a loving, unified family. No one asked where I had gone. People assumed I had moved away, grown distant, maybe even lost touch on purpose. But I hadn't. I was pushed, removed, this. And the worst part, they did it so quietly that even I began to question if maybe it was my fault. I buried myself in work, applied for research grants, took adjunct positions at small colleges, lived on oatmeal and secondhand furniture. Grandpa used to send me care packages, books, newspaper clippings, handwritten notes that always said things like, "Keep asking the hard questions, and I'm proud of you," even when no one else says it. Then one day, those packages stopped too. Now I know why. Vanessa told him I had changed my number, that I didn't want to be found. She gave him a fake number, a disconnected line. She told him I didn't want to hear from him, that I had moved on. He believed it for a while. Then he started to ask questions. He tried writing me letters, sent them to an address I never received. Because my parents had rerouted my mail to their home for security reasons. They didn't just cut me out, they made sure he thought I had left on my own, that I didn't care, and that broke him. Grandma told me the truth the day I returned to the ranch after the will reading. She opened an old notebook, one of Grandpa's, and showed me page after page of scribbled attempts to reach me. "This is the number he called every day," she said. "Until the last week. It wasn't my number. It never had been." My hands shook as I held the notebook. I knew the handwriting. I knew the ink smudges. I remembered the way he used to write my name with 3 underlines when he was proud. They erased me. They told him I disappeared. They stole the last year I could have had with him. And when I finally learned the truth, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just felt something shift inside me like a door slowly unlocking. I was done grieving. Now I wanted answers, and maybe for the first time I also wanted justice. The gravel road leading to the ranch felt longer than I remembered. The trees that once lined the path like quiet guardians now cast sharp shadows on the windshield as I drove. I hadn't been back since before Grandpa died. Not since everything had gone silent. The air was heavy with South Carolina humidity, the kind that settles in your lungs and reminds you of everything you left behind. I pulled up beside the wraparound porch, the board still warped from years of summer storms and stubborn sun. The wind chimes above the door clinked softly in the breeze. Their sound used to mean comfort. Now they felt like a memory I wasn't sure belonged to me anymore. I hesitated at the door. Knocked once. It creaked open a moment later. "So Grandma said, arms crossed, you finally came back." Her voice hadn't changed, still edged with steel, but her eyes were softer than they'd been at the will reading, as if she was holding back something bigger than disappointment, maybe guilt, maybe pain, maybe both. I stepped inside, the scent of old wood and lavender soap wrapped around me like an old blanket. The kitchen looked almost the same: floral curtains, ceramic rooster on the counter. The old wall clock ticking just a touch too loud, but something was different. The silence. "I should have known," she said as she poured 2 cups of coffee. "I should have questioned more. But your mother was convincing." And I was tired. She placed a cup in front of me. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice stayed firm. "Your grandfather knew something wasn't right. He asked about you every day toward the end. Every single day." I swallowed hard, that familiar sting rising behind my eyes. "He thought I left." "He was told you did." She pushed a box across the table. Inside were more notebooks. His, all of them labeled by month and year. I flipped through the most recent one. Page after page of notes, questions, half-written letters to me. Most never sent. After the funeral, she said, "I found out the number he had for you wasn't real. Your mother gave it to him." I confronted her. "She said you didn't want contact, that you asked not to be involved anymore." "That's a lie. I know that now." We sat there in silence for a few minutes. Just 2 women sitting at a kitchen table trying to piece together the truth from years of silence. Then she stood up, walked over to a cabinet near the back hallway, and pulled out a small lockbox. "He left this for you," she said. "Told me not to open it unless you came back." I opened it slowly. Inside was a flash drive, a folded letter, and a worn photograph of me and Grandpa from when I was 10, standing beside a makeshift greenhouse we built out of plastic sheeting and scrap wood. I was grinning, holding a handful of dirt like it was treasure. He had his arm around my shoulder. Beneath the photo was the letter. It wasn't long. "Claire, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to tell you everything in person, but I knew. I knew they were keeping you from me. And I knew you'd come back. You always ask the right questions. There's more to this inheritance than money. There's truth, and there's power in truth. I've prepared everything. You just have to be willing to open it. 8W." My hands trembled as I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. A single video file loaded for Claire. Only. I clicked play. Grandpa appeared on screen, sitting in his favorite chair on the porch, looking older than I remembered. Tired, but his eyes still held that fire. "If they're hearing this," he began, "it means they lied. It means they got to you before I could." He paused, looked straight into the camera. But I didn't leave anything to chance. He laid out everything: the transfer of assets he had filed separately from the family lawyer, the ownership documents, the lab he built in secret on the other side of the ranch, the patents he filed in Claire's name, the backup recordings of every conversation with my parents and Vanessa in the last year, all cataloged, all stored in a private server, all protected. He had prepared for their betrayal. "Don't fight them with anger," he said. "Fight them with truth. Expose them. Let the world see who they really are. That is how you win." The video ended. I sat still for a long time, the screen now black. My fingers clenched around the edge of the table. I didn't just have inheritance. I had evidence. I had his words, his plan. It was never about the money. It was about the story, the truth they buried, the version of me they tried to erase. Not anymore. I need to make some calls, I told Grandma. She nodded like she had been waiting years to hear me say that. Then let's make sure they hear everything. The second reading of the will wasn't supposed to happen. Not in my parents' version of the story. They believed the first meeting had sealed their victory. Vanessa walked away with $10 million. I walked away with nothing but a tight smile and a family-sized portion of humiliation. But Grandpa had other plans. A week later, with Grandma's support and Mr. Harold Keene's authority, we scheduled a follow-up estate meeting, one that would include all parties. Including the lawyer my family didn't even know existed. We arranged it to take place at the ranch in the living room, where Grandpa used to sip sweet tea and read scientific journals out loud like bedtime stories. I arrived first. Mr. Keene was already waiting, papers in order, laptop charged. He was calm, methodical, a man not used to drama but fully prepared for it. Grandma was in the kitchen, her movements steady. She wore a dark green blouse, soft pearl earrings, and the expression of someone who had already made peace with what was coming. They'll try to deny everything, she said. Don't let them. I won't, I said. The first to arrive was my mother. She stepped through the door like she owned the place, her perfume heavy and floral, her smile fixed but faltering as soon as she saw me seated in the armchair across from the fireplace. Oh, she said, you're here again. Next came my father's stiff, buttoned-up phone in hand, always glancing down like something more important was waiting elsewhere. Then Vanessa walked in. No greeting, just a narrowed glance at me, lips tight, chin high. I thought this was settled, she said sharply. It's not, I said simply. Mr. Keene stood. Thank you for coming. There's been a development. My father scoffed. I thought Walter's estate had already been finalized. Only the public portion, Mr. Keene said. Mr. Whitman left a private addendum. It contains personal instructions and revised asset distribution to be read only when Claire was present, and only once all family members were in the same room. My mother's smile dropped completely. What kind of revision, she asked. Mr. Keene opened a thick, sealed manila envelope. He didn't rush. Every movement was slow, deliberate, weighty. Walter R. Whitman's final instructions, witnessed and notarized privately with my firm. This document supersedes any prior estate statements related to the intellectual property business holdings and pending commercial ventures under Whitman Innovations. Vanessa leaned forward, eyes narrowing. That lab stuff, the annex. That's not worth anything yet. You might want to listen before making assumptions, Mr. Keene said, voice steady. He unfolded a long typed letter, then placed a smaller handwritten note on top. I will read the official portion first, he said. To Claire Whitman, he began. I leave the entirety of Whitman Innovations, including the research annex, all current and future patents funding accounts, and any proceeds derived from past or pending scientific ventures under my name. The room fell completely still. My mother blinked once, twice, like trying to erase what she had just heard. My father shifted in his seat. Vanessa stared at Mr. Keene. That's not possible, she said. It is, Mr. Keene replied. He continued. Further, any attempt to contest or redirect these holdings will result in the complete forfeiture of the $10 million disbursement granted to Vanessa Whitman in the public estate. What? Vanessa's voice cracked. The terms are very clear, Mr. Keene said. Interfere and you lose everything. My mother stood up, nearly knocking her chair over. No, she said. This isn't what we agreed on. Walter knew the plan. He told us everything was going to Vanessa. Mr. Keene remained calm. What he told you and what he recorded legally are not the same. Who even are you? My father snapped. You're not his main attorney. I was the one he trusted, Mr. Keene said flatly. Because he suspected you'd try to manipulate the process. Vanessa stood, pointing a trembling finger at our parents. You told me, she said. You said if I stayed close, if I did everything right, I'd get it all. You did, my mother said, voice rising. You were the chosen one, the reliable one. Claire ran off. She didn't run, Grandma snapped from the doorway. You erased her. Silence again. Then Mr. Keene cleared his throat. There is more. He picked up the smaller handwritten letter. This is from Walter to be read aloud. His personal words. Vanessa crossed her arms tightly. My parents sat back down, arm-stiff expressions unreadable. Mr. Keene began, "To my family, if you're hearing this, then it means my fears were justified. I always knew how easily the truth could be rewritten, especially when money is involved. Claire, this letter is for you. And only you. You were never the easy one. You didn't sparkle like Vanessa. You didn't charm the room. You didn't try to. But you saw deeper. You asked the harder questions. You watched. You learned. And while the world mistook your silence for weakness, I knew it was your strength. I want to make something clear. I didn't forget you. I didn't stop writing because I gave up. I stopped because I was cut off. I didn't stop calling. I was calling the wrong number, the one they gave me. I didn't stop asking about you. They just stopped answering. But I never stopped believing in you. That's why I built the annex. That's why I filed the patents in your name. That's why I recorded everything. To protect you. To give you the truth when no one else would." Mr. Keene paused. I could see him steadying his voice. Then he continued, "I know what they did. I know about the fake funeral time. I know about the rerouted mail. I know how they made you feel invisible, like you were an inconvenience. But you weren't. You were my legacy. Not because of what you achieved, but because of who you are. And this is me reclaiming your place. Everything I built with you in mind. Not for the version of you they wanted, but for the real you. Take it. Run with it. Make something better than what they tried to destroy." Mr. Keene folded the letter slowly, carefully, and placed it on the table. The room was silent. Then Vanessa broke it. "He didn't mean it," she said. Her voice cracked, almost childish. He was confused. "He loved all of us." "Yes," I said quietly. "But only one of us told the truth." My mother stood again, her hands clenched at her sides. "This is an ambush. It's emotional manipulation. None of this will hold up." "It already has," Mr. Keene said. "The documents have been registered. The accounts moved. You can scream all you want. It won't change anything." I stood. I looked at all three of them. And for the first time, I felt nothing. Not fear, not pain, just clarity. "You didn't just take money from me," I said. "You took time. You took a year I'll never get back. You took my last goodbye." My father opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. "I'm not here for your apology. I'm here to close the door you tried to lock me out of, and I'm walking through it whether you like it or not." Vanessa looked like she might cry. My mother looked like she might scream again. My father just looked away. And Grandma, she smiled for the first time in years. "Get out," she said. "What?" my mother gasped. "You heard me," Grandma said. "This house, this ranch, it belongs to Claire now. And I'll be damned if I let you poison it a second longer." They left one by one. My mother muttering threats about lawsuits. My father silent but pale. Vanessa lingered at the door. "You always had a way of making everything about you," she said bitterly. I didn't reply, because this time it was about me, about what was stolen, and what I had taken back. The news spread faster than I expected. Not because I told anyone, but because the truth always has a way of finding air when it's been suffocating too long. It began with a quiet press release. Whitman Innovations transfers ownership to Claire Whitman, granddaughter of founder Walter R. Whitman. The language was neutral, professional. No mention of family disputes or hidden wills. Just a simple announcement. But within 24 hours, local reporters started calling. Then regional ones. Then national outlets. They wanted the story behind the sudden shift. The granddaughter no one had heard of. The research facility that had never been publicized. The quiet scientist who had suddenly inherited one of the most promising climate research platforms in the Southeast. I ignored the first few inquiries. But then a journalist from a nonprofit science magazine reached out not with a microphone, but with questions about our research on drought-resistant crops. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about reclaiming my family name. It was about reclaiming my voice. I agreed to the interview, but only under one condition. "I'll talk about the science," I said. "And I'll talk about the annex." But if you want the personal story, you tell it the way it happened. No gloss, no spin, just the truth. He agreed. The article went viral, not because I was famous, but because the story resonated. The girl who was erased, the inheritance they tried to hide, the lab built in secret, the grandfather who protected her with every last breath he had. The article included quotes from the will images from the annex, and even a still from the video Grandpa had recorded. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't performative. It was quiet, measured, but it hit a nerve. Emails flooded in, messages from people I'd never met. I was cut off too, one read. My family told me I was too difficult, too different. Thank you for reminding me I wasn't crazy. I cried reading this, another said. He gave you what so many of us wished we had proof, that we mattered. A few days later, I got a call from a university where I had once been denied a grant. They invited me to speak at a conference on scientific ethics and family legacy and innovation. I accepted, and when I walked onto that stage in a navy suit and low heels, I didn't feel like an imposter. I didn't shrink. I stood behind the podium, hands steady and opened with words that had lived in my chest for years. My name is Claire Whitman, and for a long time I was told I didn't belong, not in my family, not in science, not in the room. A pause. But that was never true. I just hadn't found the room yet. The crowd was silent. Then someone clapped. Then another. And then it became a wave of sound, not deafening, but full, supportive, real. The next day, I received an invitation to partner with a rural education network. They wanted to bring the Annex's research and methods into underfunded schools across the region. I knew exactly what I wanted to call it, the Forgotten Science Project. We started small, 3 schools, 15 students, all from areas where science was often sidelined. We didn't just teach them how to run experiments. We taught them how to question, how to observe, how to trust their own data. We gave each student a blank leather notebook. On the inside cover, we printed Grandpa's words. Write the things they don't understand. One day, the world will. I watched kids who had never seen a microscope before stare through the lenses with wide eyes. One girl cried when she saw chloroplasts for the first time. No one ever told me leaves were this busy, she whispered. I smiled. They've always been busy. You just finally got to see them. In those moments, I understood something deeper about revenge. It isn't always loud. Sometimes it's building something they said you never could. Sometimes it's using the tools they tried to take from you to build something better, stronger, untouchable. Sometimes revenge is liberation. The more the program grew, the quieter my parents became. I knew they saw the articles. I knew they watched the interviews. I knew they read the story. Because I received an email one morning, no subject line, from my mother. One sentence. I never knew how much he gave you. I didn't reply. A week later, another message came, this time from my father. I didn't understand what you were trying to be. That one made me pause, because it wasn't an apology. It was something else, a confession. Still, I didn't write back. I didn't need to. I had spent years trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided I wasn't enough, who only saw value in performance, in obedience, in surface-level achievement. And now I was building value from the ground up, not for their approval, but for the kids who didn't have anyone to tell them they were worth listening to. Vanessa stayed quiet the longest, until one day I got a call from the annex front desk. She's here, the receptionist whispered. I stepped out into the lobby. Vanessa stood there. No makeup, no jewelry. Just jeans and a plain coat. She looked smaller than I remembered. I'm not here to fight, she said. Okay, I just wanted to see it, she added. The place he built, what you've done with it. I nodded. Come on, I'll show you. We walked in silence. I led her past the greenhouse, past the test plots where children from local schools had grown their first vegetables, into the heart of the annex. Research stations buzzed with quiet activity. A few grad students were measuring humidity levels, laughing softly. Vanessa stood in front of a wall covered with framed photos, students holding project soil samples, simple machines made from recycled materials. She stared at one in particular, a girl holding a handmade weather balloon, smiling like her whole world was finally making sense. She reminds me of you, Vanessa said. I didn't answer. We walked a little further. She stopped in front of a glass case where Grandpa's old notebook sat on display, open to a page where he had sketched out the early model for a sustainable irrigation loop. He kept everything she said softly, every drawing, every letter. "Yes, I don't expect you to forgive me," she said. I just, I didn't understand what I was doing. I thought I was protecting my place, and I was never a threat, I said. She looked at me. I know that now. She didn't cry. Neither did I. But there was something honest in her voice. Finally, she asked if she could volunteer with the student communication training program. She had always been the polished speaker, the one who could command a room. Now she wanted to use that for something real. "Some of them are scared to present," she said. "I could help." "Okay," I said. "Once a week." And that's how it started. Vanessa, the sister who once stood in my shadow by force, now stood beside me by choice. We weren't close, not in the way people dream sisters are. But we weren't enemies anymore either, just two people trying to build something true. The first time I walked into the research annex alone, truly alone, it was late evening. The sun had dipped just below the horizon, casting long shadows across the greenhouse windows. The silence wasn't eerie. It was peaceful, like the building itself was taking a breath. A quiet moment between everything it had already been and everything it was about to become. I wandered from room to room, touching each table like I was greeting an old friend. These spaces were never just for experiments. They were for restoration, reclamation, a place where I could put all the fractured parts of myself back together and finally make sense of the girl I had once been. On the central workbench was the leather-bound notebook Grandpa had left for me. I opened it to the first page where he'd written in neat, bold letters, "This is yours now. Don't ask for permission. Ask better questions." I smiled. The next few months moved quickly. There were deadlines, grant proposals, hiring, meetings, more media requests than I could keep up with. But in the chaos, something else began to take shape, not just a lab, not just a nonprofit, but a movement. I built a small team of researchers, scientists, who didn't come from privilege, who'd been overlooked or underestimated in traditional academia. Micah, a biochemist who had spent years teaching high school while publishing papers at night. Tara, an engineer who left a toxic lab environment and still carried the scars from it. And me, the quiet one who was once erased but now stood at the front. Together, we expanded the annex into a full campus. We repurposed an old barn into a secondary lab, converted the stable into an innovation hub. We built rainwater filtration towers, solar irrigation testing beds, even a sensory greenhouse designed for students with autism. Every inch of the place had a purpose, and every room whispered one thing: you belong here. By our second year, we had developed 2 patented systems for drought-resilient farming. One of our soil filtration prototypes won a state innovation award. The mayor came to tour the campus. Donors started calling. Universities that once rejected my proposals now asked for partnerships. But what meant more than all of that were the kids. The Little Scientist Initiative grew from 12 to almost 200 students across 5 counties. We hired local educators, gave scholarships, hosted summer camps where kids created their own sustainable farming solutions. Some were so shy they couldn't speak above a whisper on day 1. By the end of the program, they were standing in front of community panels, explaining climate models, and presenting data like professionals. One afternoon, I found a hand-drawn card on my desk. It was from a boy named Isaiah, 10 years old. On the front, he'd drawn a sunflower next to a rocket. Inside it said, "I didn't know I could be both." That's what this place was doing, making room for kids to be both. Scientists and artists, curious and afraid, smart and soft. All of it mattered. All of it had value. And through them, I was learning how to be whole again, too. Vanessa kept showing up. She arrived every Thursday at 3:00 p.m. like clockwork. She wore her hair in a loose bun and brought iced tea for the staff. She started helping students with presentation prep, how to project their voices, how to structure arguments, how to breathe between sentences. The kids adored her. Some called her Coach V. She never asked for recognition, never tried to reclaim her old place. And I never made her say the words I used to crave, "I'm sorry," because she was showing me instead. With consistency, with action, with humility. We found a rhythm, not friends, not strangers, just rebuilt. One evening after the last student had left and the annex was quiet, Vanessa handed me a folder. I wrote something she said, half embarrassed. A guide for the shy kids. Thought it might help. I flipped through it that night. It wasn't perfect. Some parts felt awkward, like she was still trying to find the right tone. But it was gentle, encouraging, real. And in that moment, I saw her not as my rival or my replacement, but simply as another woman trying to rewrite her own role. We were different, but we were done pretending. Meanwhile, my parents stayed silent. They didn't show up, didn't call. Occasionally, I'd see their names mentioned in local articles or alumni magazines from their social clubs. I'd hear whispers. They retired early, moved to Florida, still trying to save face. But I didn't hate them. I just didn't need them anymore. Because what I had built, what we had built, was more than a lab. It was a sanctuary. One day I stood alone in the main atrium, watching sunlight pour through the skylights. I held Grandpa's pocket watch in my hand. Grandma had given it to me last Christmas. Inside, taped beneath the cover, was a photo of me at age 10, standing beside my B Communication Science Fair project, smiling so hard my cheeks looked like they might burst. He carried it every day, Grandma had whispered, even when he stopped recognizing faces. He never forgot yours. I placed the watch on my office shelf beside my childhood notebook, the same one Grandpa had saved, repaired, and placed in the annex before he died. The pages were frayed, but every question I had ever written still lived there, some answered, some not, some too big to solve in one lifetime. But that was okay, because I had time now, and I had purpose. Each week I walked the fields behind the annex, past the compost stations, past the native plant beds, to the old wooden bench Grandpa had built by hand. From there, I could see the full scope of our work, the labs, the greenhouses, the children planting seeds that might one day change the world. And in the quiet, I could almost hear his voice in the wind. Write the things they don't understand. One day the world will. And now, finally, it was. It's been 6 years since the will reading. 6 years since my parents handed my sister a check for $10 million and told me to go earn my own. 6 years since I stood in that room, quiet but unshaken, while Grandpa's lawyer unfolded the truth like a map I'd been searching for my entire life. I haven't spoken to my parents since. Sometimes I see their names mentioned in community newsletters or donor lists in polished foundation brochures. They've settled into a gated coastal neighborhood in Florida, wrapped in polite smiles and curated narratives. Retired early, rebranded themselves as philanthropists, but they don't exist in my world anymore. And strangely, I don't miss them. I thought I would. I used to imagine a version of our lives where they apologized, where we healed. But what I've learned is that some people don't change. They just get quieter when they lose control. What stayed, what mattered, was the life I built beyond them. The annex has grown from a quiet converted barn to a full-fledged research campus. We now have 4 labs, 3 greenhouses, an innovation hub, and over 60 acres of experimental crop fields. We've launched initiatives across 9 counties and partnerships with universities in Kenya, Brazil, and India to share findings on sustainable agriculture. Just last month, I stood on a stage in San Francisco accepting a national award for climate innovation. The room was full of people in suits and media badges. The lights were hot. The applause was real. I wore a navy suit. Grandpa's pocket watch was tucked in the breast pocket. The one Grandma gave me the year before with his initials barely faded. Inside the lid, that tiny photo of me at age 10, beaming beside my honeybee communication project. Fists clenched in pride, hair frizzed by humidity and excitement. I carry him with me now. Not as a shadow, not even as grief, but as proof. He saw me when no one else would. And now I see myself too. At home, Grandma lives in a small apartment connected to my house in town. Her memory fades more often these days. Sometimes she asks what day it is or forgets where she put her keys. But she always remembers the important things. She remembers Grandpa's laugh, The way he used to press his fingers into the soil like it could answer him. The way he used to say soil remembers kindness. So do people. We drink coffee every morning in the sunroom. She tells me stories I've never heard before. That Grandpa once planted a tree just so he could propose beneath it. That he believed children could teach adults more about truth than books ever could. That he always knew I'd come back. And maybe that's true. Maybe I had to leave to understand what returning really meant. Some evenings I walked to the far edge of the annex property, past the student gardens, past the solar irrigation test beds, past the old compost bins and the bee colonies we started with local high schoolers. There's a bench there, wooden, slightly crooked, built by Grandpa himself. I sit there often alone, but not lonely. Above me, the stars stretch wide and bold. Real ones now, not the glow-in-the-dark stickers I used to press to my bedroom ceiling. But they make me think of her anyway, that younger version of me with dirt under her fingernails and too many questions in her notebook. The girl they tried to erase. The girl who wouldn't disappear. The girl Grandpa believed in. And on nights like this, when the wind moves just right through the trees, I swear I can still hear his voice low and certain floating through the leaves. Write the things they don't understand. One day the world will. And now finally it does.